Alright, for the first time in this series, we're going to take a look at a multiplayer game. Disney's Toontown Online was released for the PC in 2003 and was the first MMORPG that I've ever played. The game was developed by Shell Games and Disney Interactive Studios. Toontown was a membership-based PvE. Players create characters called Toons, which are essentially cartoon animals similar to the famous Disney ones like Mickey, Goofy, and Donald Duck. The premise of the game is that the Toons must defend Toontown from corporate robots that aim to promote business culture. Pretty ironic coming from Disney, right? In doing so, the Toons attack these evil robots called cogs using a variety of slapstick comedy items. These include classics such as a thrown pie to the face, a squirting gag flower, and various objects dropping from the sky like an anvil or a piano. I guess the lore explanation is that the cogs can only take so many jokes before short-circuiting or whatever. This is a kid's game, so it's understandably a bit juvenile, but at this point I think that's part of the charm. However, when you think about the premise and setup, you start to wonder how they made it work. Back in 2003, the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox were the current gen consoles. As a kid, when you thought of the term video game, you'd imagine one of those with a controller in your hand. A family may have only had one or two computers, and as a kid, you would have to ask your parents to use it. Unless your parents were gamers, they probably didn't understand why you were trying to play a game on the computer instead of your console. And if we were playing games, it was probably some simple flash game, not some complex thing like this that you had to download or go out and get a CD for. On top of all that, it was membership-based, and from what I can recall, it was not exactly cheap. The per-month rate was around $10. And this is not like Club Penguin, where a membership gives you access to a bunch of cosmetics or whatever. Without a membership in Toontown, you would get stuck in the first world and would be unable to progress further in the questline. They did sell the memberships on physical cards you could get at big box stores, which at least provided something tangible for parents to purchase. Anyways, the original Toontown servers went offline in 2013. On that same day, Disney also pulled the plug on two of their other MMO titles, Pirates of the Caribbean Online and Disney Fairies Pixie Hollow? Understandably, this made a lot of people upset, but I think a 10-year run for Toontown is not bad. But that raises the question, how am I going to play it now and capture gameplay of it? The answer to that is Toontown Rewritten. Shortly after Disney closed up Toontown, the game's assets and source code were made publicly available online, allowing fans to recreate the game in its entirety, as well as add their own changes to it. These recreations are known as private servers, and the two most popular ones that have outlasted the others are Toontown Rewritten and Toontown Corporate Clash. The latter heavily deviates from the original by adding a ton of new content, including new cogs, gags, an entire new playground, and a total reworking of the questline. For people who like the Toontown experience but want a fresh take, this is the one to try. However, in this video we're going with Toontown Rewritten, as it is the more faithful recreation of the original Toontown. It's also the more popular of the two, but in my opinion that speaks more towards nostalgia and familiarity rather than game quality. Fortunately, a couple years ago I replayed this game during the summer and got one Toon to the endgame stuff and another one pretty close, so I'll be able to show you a majority of the game. Otherwise, this would normally require months or even years of playing the game casually. Now, when it comes to private servers, Club Penguin has been trying to do the same thing, but a bunch of theirs keep getting shut down by Disney, so you might be wondering how it is that these Toontown ones are able to stay online. For reference, TTR opened to the public in 2014 and has been running ever since. Basically, the teams running these private servers are doing it out of pocket, so development and server maintenance is all being paid by the team working on this game. The membership aspect is gone, they don't accept donations, and they don't run ads or anything else that could be monetized on their website. The game is completely free. Everything about it still belongs to Disney, and they could come at any minute and fire a C&D missile, so the teams try to be very adamant about how they are not affiliated with Disney and are not profiting off of Toontown. They also removed a lot of traces of Disney IP from the game. In the original Toontown, Disney characters were seen roaming around the playgrounds as NPCs. In TTR and Clash, they're nowhere to be found. Clash even took it a step farther by renaming the playgrounds to remove the Disney character names from the titles. I take it Disney has been satisfied with this thus far, and hopefully they don't nuke these servers anytime soon. The only way that's acceptable is if they plan on reopening their own servers, but I doubt that's happening. Many of the original developers, including Jesse Schell, CEO of Schell Games and the lead designer for the original Toontown, are still active with the Toontown community. Well, now that we got all the historical preamble out of the way, let's get to the game. Each account can create up to 6 toons. When creating a toon, you can pick its color, gender, species, and adjust the body proportions. I believe everything except for species can be changed after the fact, but it will cost you a lot of in-game currency to do so. When picking a name, you can use the name picker or submit a custom one to be reviewed and approved by some moderators. As long as it's not inappropriate or a reference to some real person or evil fictional character, it should be fine. You'll be shot into a tutorial, but we'll skip that and I'll give you the rundown. After completing the tutorial, you will end up in Toontown Central, the starting playground in the game. A playground is a central hub area that is safe from enemies. There are several playgrounds in the game that you will naturally progress to through the quest line. You primarily get your quests, which are called Toon tasks, from a Toon headquarters, but some may require you to visit random NPCs spread throughout Toontown. The action happens when you go through one of these tunnels, which leads to the streets. Every playground has several streets where you will find various shops and cogs roaming around. The streets all lead somewhere, whether it be a connection to another playground or to a cog headquarters. Many toon tasks require you to defeat cogs, usually a certain type or specific cog. I briefly mentioned earlier that you fight them with comedy items which are called gags. We'll get into the exact combat system in a little bit. Let's go over the controls. In the original Toontown, movement was done via the arrow keys. This isn't a problem, but this meant that they had to center other buttons around this cluster. The control key to the left is jump, and several keys in the nav cluster also have functions. For example, the delete key is the action button, which is used in some mini-games and boss fights. Pressing home will show your gag inventory, and pressing end will show your active toon tasks. Page up and page down allow you to tilt the camera up and down. While this isn't too hard to get used to, having all the buttons clumped up in this little area is a bit awkward. Plus, you naturally still want to have your hand on the mouse since you need to interact with the UI. With your fingers on the arrow keys, it'd be really difficult to one-hand all the buttons while keeping the other on the mouse. Thankfully, TTR allows you to remap the keybinds, but for many years in all of the originals run, these were the controls. They also added sprinting at some point. It may be hard to tell since the animation is the same, but you're definitely moving faster. So in order to buy gags, you need to go to the gag shop. Every playground has one. In fact, every playground is mostly the same, just with a different theme and layout. Now to actually purchase the gags, you need some of the in-game currency, which are jelly beans. Gags cost 1 jelly bean each. There are a few ways to get some beans, but let's go with the early game recommendation, which is riding the trolley. The trolley can seat up to 4 people at a time and lets you play a series of mini-games. At the beginning of the game, you'll get some instructions. The better you perform, the more you'll earn. If you ride by yourself, you'll miss out on some of the games that are designed for multiple players. After each minigame, you'll be able to purchase gags right then and there, and can then choose to continue riding or dip out. NPCs in this game can only interact with one player at a time, and that includes the gag shop owners. So if you're in a packed store trying to buy some gags, you either have to wait and get lucky with the timing or hop to a different playground or server. Now with the gags, there's a limit to how many you can carry overall, as well as a limit to each individual gag. The level 5 and 6 gags are pretty strong and are mostly what you use from mid to late game, so there's a harder cap on how many of those you can carry. So now that we're all strapped up, it's time to hit the streets and fight some cogs. In the streets, the cogs walk on the actual road part, so if you stand on the sidewalk, you'll be safe. They all have nameplates indicating the exact model, type, and level. There are 4 branches of cogs that sort of represent different areas of corporate business. You've got the Sellbots, which are named after sales-related terms. Lawbots are law-based, Cashbots have to do with money, and Bossbots are named after managerial terms. The cogs also look physically different, aside from a few of them sharing the same head model. Every street has different spawn rates for each cog type. You can check the spawn rates by walking onto a street and then pressing the map button, which is Alt by default. The map will also mark the location of any shops you need to go to for a toon task, so it's a very handy tool. The game has 32 unique cogs, which may sound like a lot at first, but seeing as a lot of them repeat throughout the game, you'll learn them all pretty quick. To initiate a battle, you simply need to run into a cog. When this happens, the cog's chest will light up green, which indicates its HP level. It will utter one of its catchphrases and then the battle will initiate. They make some rather interesting noises. The combat is turn-based and Toons will attack first. To attack, you simply use your mouse and click on a gag that you want to use. The order that the gags attack in is the same as the order they are listed in the menu. Gags have a predetermined amount of damage, and if it lands, will deal the exact amount listed in your menu. Damage for each gag will slowly scale up as you earn XP, capping out just before you earn the next gag in the track. Each gag has innate accuracy. When a gag misses, the cog will either dodge or nothing will happen. After the Toons attack, the cogs will then immediately respond. They too can miss, but this is purely RNG as well. The whole strategy in this game is to try to take out the cogs as quickly as possible to minimize the number of times they can attack. A cog's level denotes how much HP it has, and as you learn all the gag types and their damage output, you'll eventually figure out what combination of gags is optimal for defeating each level. You can also look up the exact damage chart for each level and do the math ahead of time if that's something you fancy. Up to 4 Toons and 4 cogs can be in a battle at once. Cogs and Toons can enter battles in progress, which can happen when they collide with the imaginary barrier placed around you and the cog. So if you see a Toon trying to join the battle, you can wait until they run into position. If either the Toons or cogs are in the middle of an attack, they will wait until the gag selection phase to join. This can be a bit annoying because sometimes you'll do it by accident. If multiple Toons attack the same cog with the same gag type, then you can get a bit of combo damage added, which is denoted with yellow numbers. There's also a shot clock in the bottom right corner. When playing solo, it's not really an issue, but this starts to become a problem when multiple Toons are trying to coordinate an attack without communicating. If the clock runs out before a gag is selected, then the game will treat it as a pass. In a fight with multiple cogs, there will be arrows after clicking on a gag that let you pick which cog you want to target. The UI will also display a small indicator at the bottom of the screen to show your teammates which cog you're attacking. That way, they can either help you or attack a different target. You might be wondering how health and healing work in this game. Health points in this game are called laugh points, and your laugh meter is visible in the bottom left corner. Typically, if you've taken too much damage, you can go back to the playground and pick up these tokens that restore laugh points. In Toontown Central, the tokens are ice cream cones, but the tokens look different in every playground. In the playgrounds that are featured in the late game task line, these tokens will restore a larger amount of health. You will also passively gain health for just walking around the playground. Turning in a completed Toon task will also fully restore your laugh. Toons can also heal each other by using the tune-up Gag Track. Players can use these gags on other Toons in their battle to restore some laugh. They can also miss though, and if it does, will restore a very small amount of laugh instead of the intended amount. There's obviously no dying in this game, but if you run out of laugh, you'll become sad. Your laugh meter turns into this putrid shade of barf green, and then your Toon does this. If all Toons in the battle go sad, the cogs will taunt. On top of this, you and everyone in the vicinity will hear a super loud fail chime announcing your defeat. When you go sad, the cogs take all the gags in your inventory and you get sent back to the playground. Then you get stuck in this moping animation until you passively regen 1 laugh point. There's also a run button. Clicking this will send you back to the playground without losing any of your gags or going sad. But depending on where you are, this option is not always available. A cog's level will also dictate which gags earn XP towards attacking them. For example, say I attack a level 2 cog with a level 3 gag. I'd get no XP for doing that. This is the game's way of stopping you from fighting these weaker cogs when you get stronger gags. Sometimes it is beneficial to use a higher level gag though, as killing a cog in 1 turn means you won't take any damage. This will start to matter less in the mid-game when you start fighting higher level cogs. The cogs typically max out at level 12, but you can find cogs level 13 and above in the super endgame Sellbot field offices. After you defeat all the cogs in battle, the party gets a post-battle report card. They also do this victory dance anytime they win a battle, which is pretty amusing. This will award you your gag XP as well as assess any of your toon tasks that can be completed. Some tasks require you to receive some items from cogs, which can be frustrating since it is RNG based. In the bottom right corner of the screen you can find the sticker book and a shortcut to the options. The sticker book contains all your stats, the server or district list, the world map, game options, and some other miscellaneous stuff. You can also use it to teleport back to the playground instead of walking all the way down the street. As with any MMO, communication is a big part of the game. However, with this game being marketed for kids, there obviously was going to be some level of moderation involved. By default, all Toons get access to speed chat. This is a drop-down list of phrases that the game's creators thought would be useful for communicating. There are phrases for more casual interactions as well as strategic ones meant for battle. Anytime a phrase is uttered, you'll hear that Toon's animal make noises. They also differ depending on the length of the sentence and whether or not they include exclamation marks or question marks. These voices are really goofy, but that was probably done on purpose. And they are pretty obviously done by a human. Some phrases also come with emotes, which you can also do independently should the situation call for it. Email verification will allow your account to access Speed Chat Plus. This allows you to freely type, but there's still a filter of approved words. If you spell a word wrong or use a word that's not approved, it'll automatically be replaced with an onomatopoeia of your Toon species. Surprisingly, they keep it updated with quite a lot of abbreviations and game lingo. When you click on a Toon, it will open up a player card. This will give you several options of interacting with that player, such as adding them to your friend list, whispering a message to them that only they can see, or teleporting to them. You can also check their laugh level and gags. I imagine a lot of the people playing this game are around my age, reliving their childhood as adults. As such, most people are pretty polite and cooperative. In fact, I find more often than not that people don't really say anything aside from dropping a GG at the end of battles. But due to the rather restrictive nature of chatting, the few bad eggs will behave in rather strange ways. While I was recording some early game footage, a Toon that I had friended in the playground teleported to me while I was fighting some cogs. They then unfriended me and started using several of the stinky phrases. I didn't really care, but they followed me around for another few minutes doing this. When I returned to an HQ to turn in my task, they followed and apologized. Pretty weird. Whoever that person is, I hope they're alright. A few are also sticklers for playing as meta as possible. Some are friendly and are willing to explain meta strategies to newer players, but as with any online game, some people are just rude all the time. Then there's the bunch that will intentionally grief by throwing out some really bad gag choices in an attempt to make everyone go sad or to frame others as griefers. This is known as greening. It's kind of pathetic. All I gotta say is, what are you doing? So now that we've got the basic mechanics down, let's take a look at how progression works in this game. I talked a bit about Gag XP earlier, so let me elaborate on that. Basically, every time you successfully use a gag, you'll get awarded XP. The XP awarded for using each gag is the same as its level. So for example, a level 2 gag will reward you 2 points for successful use, level 3 will give you 3 points, and so on. When this bar reaches the threshold, you'll be awarded the next gag in the track. The XP continues to accumulate and each gag track maxes out at 10,000 XP, although the thresholds for new gags can differ depending on the track. For example, Throw and Squirt get the level 4 gag at 400 XP, while with Sound you'd need 1000. At 10,000 XP, you unlock a level 7 gag. Level 7 gags are very powerful, and all of them are capable of hitting 4 cogs. As such, the game will not allow you to simply purchase them from gag shops. After hitting 10,000 points in a track, the tracker will then say 500 to go and begin counting down. After hitting 0, it will either stay at 0 or award you the level 7 gag again if you don't currently have it in your inventory. Then the tracker resets. It can reset an infinite amount of times and makes it so you don't use these gags willy-nilly while still giving you a way to get them back. Earning new gags is where a big bulk of the grind is, and players will often tell each other what they're training if they're trying to level up one of their tracks. Some places have multipliers that greatly speed up the process, but that's a bit excessive to go over for now. When picking a new toon task at an HQ, you will be given 3 options. A good tip for newer players is to shop your tasks, which means talking to each of the HQ officers. Each one will offer you a different set of tasks, so it's best to avoid ones that require you to defeat a specific cog. Each toon task will also state what it rewards upon completion. The game generally does a good job holding your hand through the main task line. When you are able to carry multiple toon tasks, the game will brickwall your progression if one of the tasks you are working on needs to be completed before advancing. When this happens, the HQ officers will only feed you tasks marked with just for fun. These tasks usually reward some cosmetic prize or jelly beans. Rewards that indicate mainline tasks are any that improve your stats. This includes laugh boosts and upgrades to your gag inventory and jelly bean backpack. Early game, it will mostly be collecting the frames needed for getting a new gag track. In the late game, you'll be building your cog suits. In TTR and in the original, you always start with throw and squirt. Throw gags are a collection of pies and cakes that the toons throw directly into the cog's face. This is the de facto damage dealing track. Squirt gags are an assortment of water-based attacks. These are less prone to missing than throw, but as a trade-off gag for gag, they do less damage. Part of the Toontown Central task line involves obtaining your first new gag track. The game will offer you a selection between sound and tune up. Most toons choose sound, as this gag track can damage multiple cogs at once, making it extremely useful throughout the game. A lot of the late game meta involves high-level sound use, so getting it trained early helps out. It's not a sin to choose tune up first, but as a new player it can be a bit tough. To earn a new gag track, you must obtain 16 frames that form a film reel, which means about 16 tasks in total. Frame 16 is always done last, but the rest don't have to be done in order, and you can track your progress in your sticker book. Typically, the task for the last frame is the longest, as you will then unlock the ability to use the new track upon completion. You can only have 6 of the 7 gag tracks, and most players go without drop or trap. I'll circle back and go over all the tracks in a bit. Around the time you get to the second playground, Donald's Dock, you will need to start going into Cog Buildings. If a cog walks into a shop, they will take it over and turn it into a building. Higher level cogs have a higher tendency to take over shops, which is why they aren't too common in Toontown Central. However, in later playgrounds like the Burg and Donald's Dreamland, you'll see them everywhere. You can consider these mini-dungeons. These can be really inconvenient because a lot of the mainline toon tasks require you to go to a specific shop on a street. If the shop is a cog building, you either need to defeat it and convert it back, or district hop until you find one where it isn't a cog building. And I guess now would be a good time to do the district tangent. So you've probably looked at the gameplay so far and thought, for around 1500 players, the streets seem kinda empty. Well, the game has several districts or servers, which can be viewed in your book that I briefly mentioned earlier. These are all basically carbon copies of the Toontown world. However, what's different are the cog buildings, as they are independent to each district. So just because a building exists in one district doesn't mean it exists in another. Most districts can also have cog invasions, where one specific cog is the only one that spawns except in boss battles and cog facilities. Some of these districts also feature a chat restriction where players can only use speed chat phrases. Alright, back to cog buildings. The level and type of cog that walks into the building will determine how hard it is. However, during an invasion, it doesn't matter what the building is, it will still only be the invasion bot. So if you have a toon task that requires a specific building type, you can hop over to an invasion district and fight an entire building of easy cogs. The circles on the outside indicate the number of floors. Generally, the more floors, the harder it is, but even 5-floor ones can still vary in difficulty depending on what kind of cog took it over. So how it works is that each floor is a battle against cogs. You don't do anything else in the buildings aside from walk into the elevator to get to the next floor. The Toons do the victory dance after each battle though, which is pretty funny. The time in between is basically an opportunity to bail for whatever reason, like if the building is too hard or a player disconnects. Also, the report card doesn't come to the last floor, so don't bail early. And the music in here is awesome. For the most part, it is recommended to enter buildings with some other players. However, with a player count that typically hovers around 1 to 1.5k, it can be hard finding somebody else wandering the streets and willing to help. Enter toonhq.org. This is a website that lets you create a group for any dungeon-like event in the game. I'm not sure if it existed back in the original's heyday, but for much of TTR's existence, it went like this. You would have to manually enter all the information yourself. First, you enter your Toons information like name, species, laugh points, etc. Then say if you wanted to do a building, you would have to list what type it is, how many stories, and what server and street you are on. When people join the group, they will eventually meet up with you in the game using that information. However, in what I assume is a fairly recent change, the site has introduced in-game integration with both TTR and Corporate Clash. So there's an option in the game settings that gives you a code. You enter this code onto the ToonHQ site and it'll automatically retrieve all the information about all your Toons. You can even add multiple accounts. Then when you walk past a building, you can create a boarding group. This will also generate a group template on the site so you can easily make a listing. People who have the integration enabled will get a prompt in-game when joining the group, which will allow them to teleport directly to the front of the building. This is an incredible feature and saves a ton of time. When you finish the building, you'll be crapped back out onto the street and you and everyone else can watch and hear the building turn back into a shop. If you head inside the shop afterwards, you can find portraits of you and the other Toons who defeated the Cog Building to commemorate your good deed. There's also an audio cue for when a shop turns into a Cog Building with this whistling sound. So yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of the game, defeating cogs and Cog Buildings. Let's revisit the Gag Tracks. I already touched on sound and tune up, so let's move on to the next set. In the task line of the second playground, Donald's Dock, you get to choose between Lure and Drop. Lure is a supportive gag type that stuns cogs, making them unable to attack for a certain number of rounds. A recent quality of life update to TTR added an indicator showing how many rounds the cog will be stunned. Lure gags alternate between being single and multi-target. In the gag order, Lure will initiate third after tune-up and trap. When a cog is lured, they can receive knockback damage from throw and squirt gags. Typically, sound should not be used on lured cogs as they will not only unstun them but will also not benefit from any knockback damage. The game even has a speed chat phrase for this. Since lure gags move cogs forward, drop gags will never work on them. Drop gags do the second most damage out of any track in the game, making them extremely powerful. They're pretty self-explanatory. Items fall from the sky and squash the cogs. Training drop can be difficult as it goes last in the gag order, so a lot of times cogs will have already died to other gag tracks before getting to drop. Choosing between drop and lure may be a little harder than choosing between tune-up and sound. They both seem awesome, right? Well, there's only one problem. They both start with low accuracy. So the low-level gags especially are goddamn atrocious. No matter which you choose, it will start off being a very rough time. The third playground, Daisy's Garden, does not have a task line for a new gag track, but instead focuses on the Sellbot factory, prompting players to build a Sellbot disguise suit. Disguise suits are needed to fight the Cog Bosses, which are also aptly named after executive business positions. I'm going to go over one of the Cog facilities shortly, so I'll explain more once we get there. In the next playground, Minnie's Melody Land, players will be able to choose between whatever they didn't choose in Toontown Central and Trap. Trap gags are executed before lure gags and are exactly what the name implies. My favorite is the rake because of this twang sound. Also the TNT because of the way the cogs look down all sad at it. Trap gags do the most damage in the game. However, trap doesn't work without lure, so if you're going to choose it, you should have lure yourself, or else you better find a good friend willing to train it with you. The trap gags will always work if lure lands, and I believe they even improve the accuracy of lure. In the fifth playground, the Berg, players should have 5 gag tracks at this point, and will be able to choose one more of the remaining 2. The task for frame 16 is notoriously long and is synonymous with the NPC it revolves around, Lil Old Man. You tell anyone I'm working on Lil Old Man and they'll get it. The reason it's so bad is because the task requires you to recover items from fighting the highest tier cogs. It's not simply defeating them, so there's an RNG aspect to it. Then, what I haven't mentioned yet is that the highest and second highest tier, so these 8, are building only cogs. That means that the only place you can find them are in Cog Buildings, Cog Facilities, Cog Boss fights, or during an invasion. To top it all off, towards the end of the task, you'll have to defeat 24-story Cog Buildings. Not necessarily hard, but definitely time-consuming, especially because for most Toons they would have already been doing buildings trying to find one of the 4 highest tiers. They could have cut it down to 10 and it still seemed tedious. To get to most of the Cog Bosses, you'd have to grind all the way to the end of the task line. I take it they knew this would be a bit boring, so the game will give you a task line to prepare for the first boss when you get to Daisy's Garden. As such, it's by far the easiest out of the 4 bosses. It'd be a bit much to go over all the Cog Bosses and facilities, so I'll focus on this one since most players will get to this point in the game. Oak Street leads to the Sellbot HQ. In the HQ, you'll be able to do a Cog facility called the Sellbot Factory. Other HQs have multiple facilities, but to keep things simple, Sellbot HQ only has 1, but with 2 entrances. In these, Toons are required to move throughout the facility on their own, and there's a combination of cog battles, platforming, and puzzle solving. I believe this is also the first time you'll see Skelecogs in the game. They're supposed to be cogs that haven't got their outer shell put on yet. They're functionally no different than normal cogs, and you can even click their name tag to see the cog they're based on. I guess they help immerse the player in this factory setting. Back in the day, a lot of the doors and elevators were quite glitchy, but it seems like TTR has really improved the collisions over the years. Since it's not exactly clear where you're supposed to go, newer players might have a hard time navigating through this place. To beat it, you need to traverse to the center silo and defeat the foreman. The factory has 2 main metas for completion known as short and long. The short factory will take Toons on the shortest route to complete the factory, skipping many of the battles. The long version is a route where Toons will do every battle in the factory. Many Toons return to the factory to earn merits. And let me explain what merits are. When you assemble your cog suit, you'll be able to fight the Vice President, the Sellbot Cog Boss. For the Sellbot suit, you just need to complete the factory 10 times. Other suits will have actual Toon tasks similar to the ones for your gag tracks. To fight a Cog Boss, your suit needs to be marked ready for promotion, which you can check in your inventory. The Sellbot suit needs merits, which you get by defeating Sellbots anywhere. When the bar says ready for promotion, you are clear to fight the Cog Boss. When you beat him, the bar needs to be refilled and the threshold will increase slightly. Your cog suit will follow the levels of the actual cogs. So for example, you start off as a cold collar level 1. After beating the VP, your suit will become a cold collar level 2. When your suit reaches the highest level for that cog, in this case a cold collar level 5, you'll then become the next cog in the hierarchy at its lowest level. In this case, a telemarketer level 2. The higher level cog suits can require thousands of merits to be ready for promotion. In the original Toontown, earning merits was painfully slow, but I believe in TTR they've reduced the grind. This is all pretty complex, but it really helps out with understanding the late game content by introducing this in the mid game. Now let's check out how the actual boss fight goes. Every Cog HQ has a lobby room where Toons can gather before fighting a boss. Unlike the other parts of the Cog HQ, these rooms have no cogs roaming around. The lobby to fight the VP is right across from the entrance. You can only enter the lobby when you have your cog disguise fully assembled. Good disguise, right? I think shielding everything but your face kinda defeats the purpose. At least you get access to all the cog's catchphrases. But anyways, you might be surprised to discover that you can actually have 8 Toons in a boss battle. Pretty crazy, right? 8 Toons in one battle? Well, not really. You'll get split up into 2 groups of 4, which is randomized. It is funny seeing 8 Toons in the elevator though. Although the later elevators look pretty bad, like borderline unfinished. The lore of the VP is that you're there to save one of the game's NPCs. Every boss fight has a reward, and for this one you'll get the rescued NPC as an SOS card that can help you in future battles. They used to have a dedicated page in your book, but will now appear in your trunk. Under each card, it will say what each NPC does. SOS cards are generally powerful, and you'll often find high-level Toons coming back to play the VP to farm some up. In the original game, I think you were only allowed to carry 16 different cards, but now you can carry all of them. Every boss fight is structured the same. The Cog Boss sees through your disguise, you fight a couple waves of cogs, and then a free roam combat section. It's interesting to note that the cogs actually come out of the Cog Bosses. So I guess he's like a carrier vessel or something? For the VP, there are actually 2 sections of cog battles. After the first one, the VP will begin crawling up the ramp towards the elevator in an attempt to escape. You don't have to do anything as it will automatically put you into the next battle, but some players like to follow him. The teams also get scrambled again. You'll fight some Skelecogs this time around, and there are often multiple level 11s and 12s, making combinations of sound the meta way of dealing with them. Afterwards, the cage containing the captured Toon will lower close to the ground, and thus begins the free roam section of the boss battle. If you jump towards the cage, the Toon will give you an unlimited arsenal of whole cream pies. You throw them using the action button, delete by default. Holding the button will move the meter, which determines the angle that you throw the pie at. The objective is to push the VP all the way off the edge of the platform down the ramp. However, in order to stun him so that you can knock him back, you need to throw a pie into his doors. Cream pie right in the flaps. You can do this from the front or the back. Generally, the people in the back have an easier time as he will mostly aggro towards the front. It's good to have a few Toons focused on stunning him while the rest are focused on pushing him back. If the splat icon is yellow, that means it's a valid hit. The only way to heal each other in this part is by throwing the pies at each other. Occasionally he'll do a jump attack and slam the ground. To counter it, you need to jump when he slams. You'll see a red exclamation point letting you know to jump, which is really nice in case you're not facing him. Once he reaches the edge of the platform, everybody drops the GG and then you all dance to a report card. The captured Toon is set free and added to your inventory as an SOS card, then everyone is teleported back to Daisy's garden. I think they've made it easier over the years, but it also helps that most players know what they're doing at this point. As with any MMO, there are several non-combat leisure activities that players can do in Toontown. The first one we'll talk about is actually somewhat important since some of the quests actually require you to do this, which is fishing. To fish, you simply need to find a pond and walk up to one of the fishing platforms. Then you just gotta drag the arrow and launch it towards the little shadows in the water. It's pretty basic. You use jelly beans as bait, but once you've caught some fish, you can sell them to the local fishermen and you'll usually make more beans back. This is probably the best way of earning jelly beans in this game and is definitely much faster than riding the trolley. Every time you catch a new species, it will be cataloged in your sticker book. For every 10 species you discover, you will get a laugh boost. Each playground and street has a pond, and some species have a higher drop rate at specific ponds. Want to know which ones? Head over to toonhq.org. In addition to being a group finder, this website is also the holy grail of information for this game. For the most cost-effective fishing spot, most players will go to the berg due to the pond being pretty small. When selling your fish to the fisherman, you will often make more beans than you are allowed to carry in your inventory. If such is the case, the excess beans will be deposited into the jelly bean bank at your house. And yes, every toon has a house, or estate as they call it. To go there, open up your book to the map screen and press the Go Home button. All 6 toons on your account share the property, but they all have an individual house. Inside, you can use the telephone to call Clarabelle the cow and order customization items for your toon or your estate from her catalog. Some items take a while to be delivered though, and I'm talking several real-time hours. When they arrive, you'll get a notification to check your mailbox. Anyways, here's the bean bank. It can store up to 15,000 beans. You can transfer beans to and from your inventory. There's also the closet to change your shirts and pants, and the chest to change your other accessories. Now if we go back outside, there's a huge pond you can fish at, but it's actually too big, so I don't recommend it unless there's a specific species you're trying to catch. You could also do some gardening, which requires you to buy a gardening kit from the catalog. Here you have to guess a combination of jelly beans to grow a flower. The game's been out so long that you could just save yourself some time and use ToonHQ again. Then you water it and wait like a day or whatever, and once you come back and pick the flower, your shovel rank will go up a point. When you level up your shovel, you'll get access to longer combinations to grow new flower types. Like with fishing, you can get a laugh boost from this too. You can sell the flowers to this wheelbarrow. You can also plant statues, but as far as I can tell, it's just decoration. Another gardening related thing is planting gags to make them organic. This will let you grant a buff to one of your gag tracks. You have to start with the first gag in the track. You can tell it's fully grown when the little gag icons appear on the tree. They will also glow in your gag page. You can also check other people's inventories to see what track they've planted. Getting them started is the longest part. You take the gag level, multiply it by 3, and that's how many days it takes to grow. If you had a track planted but didn't water them, they'll wilt and you'll lose the organic bonus. Once a day, you can also farm the gags off the trees into your inventory. This is a good way of getting a level 7 gag back without going through the 500 XP reset. When an organic gag is selected during battle, there will be a small leaf icon above it. Making gags organic makes them slightly better, but can be the difference between being able to kill a cog with a certain combination. The most common example is with Organic Throw. With the birthday cake doing 110 damage, it can solo kill a lured level 11 cog with the added knockback damage. Toons can also have pets called Doodles. You buy them from a playground's pet shop. They come with different traits, and good old ToonHQ can let you know where the best ones to buy are. You can call them during battle to perform a trick to restore some laugh. It doesn't always work though, and sometimes they'll just sit there. Otherwise, they're just chilling at your estate. Repeating tricks will improve their effectiveness, so you can try to train them to make them more useful when you call them. They'll eventually get tired though. But you can feed and scratch them to make them happy again. Another leisure activity is go-karting. Adjacent to Toontown Central is a playground called Goofy Speedway. Here you can race against other players paying tickets to enter. The idea of being able to go-kart in this game is a great one, however once you see it in action you'll start to realize how it went wrong. In the original, the controls were delayed, the track's pretty bland, and the servers often making players appear very jittery. I don't think it's much better here, as the only people really playing it are trading wins to level up their racing stats. The last leisure activity I want to mention is mini golf. Adjacent to Donald's Dock is Chippendale's Acorn Acres. Here you get access to both mini golf as well as the boss bot headquarters. In the original game, there was a closed-off tunnel that hinted at further expansion. In TTR, it is used to get to the Cartoonival grounds, an annual fair that occurs for 1 month starting on September 19th, the day that the original Toontown went offline. Anyways, mini golf is sorta like racing in that most people are just trading wins to get a couple extra laugh points. As far as the actual golf game, it's pretty basic. You're better off playing something like Golf with Friends for a real mini putting experience. But it is more fun than go-karting in my opinion. There's quite a lot more I didn't talk about, such as going in depth with the other Cog HQs and bosses, as well as the Sellbot field offices and Sellbot task force, which is new endgame content in TTR. You can also throw parties, which is basically just a combination of trolley games. And there are a few seasonal events too, like Halloween and winter festivities, as well as the Cartoonival I mentioned earlier. Like many MMOs, you're going to need a decent amount of uninterrupted time when playing this. The learning curve is fairly straightforward and you'll learn very quickly from other players. The progression is a bit tricky to keep track of, but because it's a relatively relaxing game to play, the grind doesn't feel too bad as long as you utilize Toon HQ and are willing to play with others. With all that in mind, it's really not too hard. And in the context of an MMORPG, it doesn't take that long to get to the end of the task line, especially if you've already gone through it before. The player base is rather small, but since most events in the game only need 4 to 8 players, it's easy finding others to help. I think the best way to describe this game is that it's cozy. It's just really chill. You could mute the in-game music and throw on your own playlist or a TV show and just vibe out. If your significant other sucks at video games but you've always wanted to try something together, this actually might be something you'll enjoy. For one, the pace is somewhat forgiving since the combat is turn-based, so you don't have to focus on real-time movement akin to a traditional RPG or FPS. Second, it's generally not a demanding game hardware-wise. Plus, it's cute. Who doesn't love anthropomorphized animals? One of the biggest criticisms against Rewritten has been that it takes a long time for the team to bring out new content. Many of the quality of life improvements that I've mentioned throughout the video have only come out in the past 2 to 3 years. This executive office tower, which seems to be some kind of endgame expansion, has been sitting dormant in the BossBot headquarters since 2015. The game's biggest update, which introduced the Sellbot field offices, was officially announced in 2018 but didn't release until the end of 2021. However, when it did, it was awesome. What's most impressive is that it feels right at home with the rest of the game, almost as if it was part of the original. Really, it's so damn good I almost can't believe it wasn't from the original. Field offices did exist, but they were much simpler and more like a regular cog building. Like the cubicle game and boiler fight is all TTR. Part of the issue is that Clash is pumping out content like nobody's business, making it easy to draw comparisons. And I've hardly talked about Clash in this video, but seriously, I don't want to understate how much content that game has. There's some really insane stuff going on over there. I think both of these teams deserve praise. A game that is technically dead continues to live on thanks to them. As far as TTR goes, I personally think it's in a great state. It's faithful to the game I played as a kid, and the quality of life improvements make it a much more enjoyable experience. The field offices and other additions to the endgame content are incredible. As I was working on this video, the Rewritten team hosted their annual in-person Toon Fest, where they revealed their upcoming slate of content for the game. Assuming they can deliver on all of these in a timely manner, then the future for Rewritten is looking very bright. Later this year in September, Toontown Rewritten will celebrate its 10th anniversary. This means that it will have lived as long as the original. That's a tremendous milestone for a fan-made remake. It's been about 20 years since the original Toontown first launched, and after all this time, it is clearly still beloved by many. Whether it's Rewritten, Corporate Clash, or some other server, it's nice that we can still ask the following question.
Are you tuning up?